Hi, I'm Dr. Tronél Hellberg, and in this video, I'm going to look at music practical performance assessment. Now, this is quite a hefty topic, so I'm going to split it up into 5 different parts. Now, let's have a look at those parts, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Now, in part 1, and that is today's video, I'm going to discuss just general tips when it gets to examining. Then in part 2, how to assess the level of playing. Part 3, assessing different instruments. And I'm going to move into a video that just focuses on sight reading, on technical work, as well as oral. And then lastly, with my final video, part 5, I'm going to look at the assessment of classical music pieces. And that also includes ensemble work. And just a note on the side there, when it gets to the assessment of jazz, indigenous African music, and contemporary music, these aspects will be discussed under these topics. Now, let's have a look at part 1, just the general tips. So today I'm going to look at your skill set as examiner, and then I'm going to look at the skills you need and things that you need to be aware of when it gets to the actual examination. Now, let's start with your skill set. On the side, and this is now point 1, I want you to prepare your learners as a teacher. And by that, I don't only mean, taking them through the exam process. I mean to teach them what they're being assessed on. Okay? Because if they know what they're being assessed on, they can also practice accordingly. Then the next thing that you need to have in your set of skills is a solid knowledge of different instruments. And I promise you, as you are going to develop as an examiner and get more experience, you're definitely going to learn a lot about different instruments. Then your knowledge of different styles, sorry. Now, say you have been classically trained, and that's perfect. But you have to expand on that. You need to learn about jazz. You need to learn about African music, contemporary music, how to assess it, how the rules are different when it gets to assessing them. Then also own your own limitations. It's really okay not to know everything. And in fact, it's really impossible to know everything. Remember, you're an expert in a particular field or instrument, and still you don't know everything. And therefore, it's really okay to acknowledge your limitations, but at the same time, show your willingness to learn. And a final tip that I would like to give you there is never to pretend that you know something you don't. Now, I'm going to just quickly give you an example here. I once examined with a lady, she's a piano player, and she claimed to have perfect pitch. So I'm a classical guitarist, and my learner was playing. And the learner literally got all the scales wrong. And by that, I mean on the guitar, the positions. So she would say play C major, and the learner would play B major. So literally, all the scales sounded perfect, but they were actually all wrong. And she didn't pick that up. Okay, so it's okay. Don't pretend to know something you don't, to be somebody you are not. Because in the end, that's going to also just put the other examiners at ease, and it's going to build stronger relationships. Number 5, trust your gut. Sometimes you doubt yourself, but go on that instinctive feeling you have inside of you. And then if you in doubt, give the learners the benefit of the doubt. Good. Now let's move on to the actual exam. The first point there is to keep interferences to a minimum. And by that, I mean that you check that the school don't have the intercom set in that particular room or limit outside noises. Then the second point there is to keep things like fire drills, load shedding if you're in South Africa, sport events in mind when you're planning your music exams. Another point that's sometimes overlooked is to tune the piano. Now, this might seem, a lot of these might seem like they're really obvious, but these are the type of things that go wrong in exams, are forgotten, and can impact the flow and just the feeling of the exam. Then just a general awareness there. If you've been examining, you might be aware of this, but fans can have an influence on the sound and they can actually distort the sound. So if they're bothering you, just switch them off. Then keep the room well ventilated. You need oxygen, the learner needs oxygen. Okay, and then that famous reminder, put your phone on silent. Now, although learners are supposed to have their assessment sheets, sometimes they forget them. So it's good to just have some extra assessment sheets with you. And also if you make a mess, at least you can start all over on a new assessment sheet. If you're the accompanist, remember to take your music into the exam room. Then another handy tip I would like to give you is to have a list of comments next to you. Now, this is especially useful if you are new at examining. And the reason why I say this is that syllabi like CAPS, the IEB SACS, ABRSM, Trinity, Guildhall, they all provide grade-specific rubrics and comments. And these comments can be helpful when you don't know how to quite express yourself. Okay, so they can spark that inspiration, and it will also help you if English isn't your home language. Then the next tip that I would like to give you is to have conversion tables. And by that I mean that you have in the one column your marks out of 30, and in the next column it shows the conversion to 100. This is really quite a good thing to have with you. Then number 11, check your stationery. Another thing that seems so obvious, but if you run out of ink, you run out of ink. So I suggest having, 2 black pens in your bag, a pencil, lead, an eraser, Tipex, a calculator. And then another tip that I would like to give you, and that's something I do because I'm quite sensitive when it gets to sound, is I have a set of earplugs. They come in handy when you assess louder instruments like drums, but also if you have a couple of exams, like 5 or 7 exams, then your ears become tight. It helps to actually protect your ears. Now, moving on to the next point, and that is having scrap paper. So why do we need scrap paper? You can take notes there as you listen to a piece and also jot down some reminders. So every time you pick up something, you can quickly write it down. If needs be, you can also indicate the bar number. Now, another reason why you should have this is it helps you to remain objective throughout listening to a piece. Now, speaking of that, don't look for mistakes. So that is my point that I'm making at number 13. So don't scrutinize every single bar and see, what went wrong. Is there something that you can find that was wrong there? And this is a characteristic you often find with your very harsh or inexperienced examiners. And a tip there is if you end up examining with an examiner that's like really very critical, very harsh on the learners, your side notes will really come in handy to put things into perspective if there is a difference of opinion. Okay, then the next point is, number 14, when to comment. Now, I would suggest commenting towards the end of a piece. Why? Because, like sometimes a piece can really start very well, but it ends in a complete disaster. Then you already wrote brilliantly performed, okay, and no, not consistently. Okay, so again, that's where your notes on the side will help you. Don't stress out that you're going to forget about things. That's why you have these notes. And when you reach the end of the piece, it's easy to quickly reflect on what's your overall impression. That's very important. That overall impression, not to take a specific thing that went wrong and focus on that and bring the learner down on that aspect. Okay, so think of your overall your impression of the piece and look at your side notes, and that will help you to give valid and relevant comments as well as objective marks. Then the next point is to check that the piece the learner is playing is on the right level. That also applies, of course, for your scales. And when it gets to scales, make sure that the scales the learner is presenting comes from a legitimate syllabus. Then number 16 is just a quick note on penalties. And by that I mean if a learner forgets his or her sheet music or didn't bring the scale list. Okay, so sure, they need to be penalized, and I will mention something about that just now, but refer to the curriculum, how to penalize them, or if you're unsure, just ask the chief examiner. Then number 17, set the learners at ease. Now, from your own experience, you know the difference an examiner's attitude can make, okay? It can really unnerve you, or it can set you at ease, and it can really help you to play the pieces to the best of your ability. Okay, so be that examiner that sets learners at ease. Even if they forget their music, okay? Even if they forget their scale list, okay? So yes, they should be penalized for this. But I've been in exams where examiners really unnerve the learner at the beginning. Is it really fair to point out and hammer on the fact that why did you leave your scale list at home? You know it's supposed to be in the exam. Okay, and I'm thinking specifically about this one exam where the examiner unnerved the learner, and the learner ended up being in tears right at the beginning of the exam. I mean, how is that fair to the learner to play the pieces to the best of their ability? They've been working so hard on it. Okay, so make sure that none of these small little things get in the way of your attitude and your own judgment. Then number 18, remind yourself to remain objective and not to make assumptions. And that's something you need to do throughout a particular exam. And if you examine several consecutive exams, ask yourself, am I still consistent? Am I objective? Do I get more critical as I get more tired? And then lastly, remember that you are working with a person. It's really not just a bag of bones that's sitting in front of you. And just take a moment when that learner enters the exam room. Take a moment to appreciate the learner for who they are. Take a moment to just imagine what it took them to get to where they are, their attempt. And then even if they make mistakes or are even unprepared, okay, their nerves get the better of them. Remember, it's a person that you're working with. What if this was your child? And you would surely say, no, man, it's really fine. I understand. Look, I need to penalize you, but you still did well, or, you know, I need to congratulate you for showing up. That's already a huge thing. And then remember, enjoy the music. I know sometimes the learners make a mess, sometimes they come unprepared, and that's okay. Okay, so at least just pretend to really appreciate the effort they put into it, and in that, mark them, but remain objective and always have constructive feedback in mind. Okay, and that is it for this first part, discussing just a couple of general tips when it gets to music practical performance assessment.